The Warhammer 40K universe has some of the most absurd, overpowered, and downright terrifying war machines ever put to paper. Tanks that eat planets, tanks that run on demon juice, tanks that have been fighting longer than most species have existed. So today I'm breaking down every single one of them, starting with the one that gets zero respect. Rhino, the most important tank in the entire Imperium of Man, can barely fight. The Rhino, the backbone of every Space Marine chapter, the vehicle that has delivered more death to more battlefields than any super heavy ever built, is armed with a single storm bolter. One. That's it. That's the whole loadout. Its armor is thin enough that practically any dedicated anti-tank weapon will punch straight through it, which makes it roughly as durable as a very ambitious shipping container. This thing isn't a combat platform. It's a metal box with an engine and a prayer taped to the dashboard. But here's why it matters. The Rhino has been in Imperial service for over 10,000 years, dating back to the Great Crusade and even earlier on ancient Terra. The Imperium has built so many across its forge worlds that tracking the total number became functionally impossible millennia ago. The logistical servitors just gave up. It carries 10 fully equipped Space Marines, drops them into the worst firefight imaginable, and then presumably gets blown up about 4 seconds later. It's a glorified taxi with a death wish, and the Imperium has made more of them than any other vehicle in human history. But if you think a galaxy's worth of disposable transport boxes is excessive, wait until you see what happens when the Imperium actually tries to make something that shoots back. Predator. Take the Rhino chassis we just talked about and bolt 60 metric tons of armored killing machine onto it. Same bones, completely different beast. The Predator is what happens when the Mechanicus looks at a transport vehicle and says, what if this was terrifying instead? Here's what makes the Predator genuinely impressive. It's not just a tank, it's two tanks. The turret mount accepts either an autocannon for shredding infantry or a twin lascannon for punching holes through enemy armor. The side sponsons swap between heavy bolters and additional lascannons, and the entire conversion process takes under 48 hours. So Monday morning you've got an anti-infantry suppression platform, and by Wednesday you've got a dedicated tank hunter. Same chassis, same crew, totally different war. The armor values tell the real story though. Front armor of 13, sides at 11, rear at 10. Compare that to the Rhino's 11/11/10, and you start to understand why the Imperium bothers training dedicated crews for these things. And that training is no joke. Individual Predator crews spend years in combat preparation before they're even allowed near a live vehicle, which is a pretty stark contrast to Rhino drivers, who are basically handed keys and told to not die. The design itself dates back to the Great Crusade era, and mass production was already well underway before the Horus Heresy. After the Heresy, though, the Imperium leaned into it even harder, because it turns out Galactic Civil War really clarifies your priorities around firepower. But if you think the Predator is where the Imperium's armored ambitions stop, wait until you see what the Eldar were building while humanity was still figuring out treads. Falcon Grav Tank. Everything we've talked about so far runs on tracks, burns fuel, and shakes the ground when it moves. The Falcon doesn't touch the ground at all. This is the Eldar's main battle tank, and calling it a tank feels almost disrespectful. It's an anti-gravity weapons platform that glides across the battlefield faster than most things the Imperium fields on the ground. The whole design philosophy is built around one idea: don't be where the enemy is shooting. The standard loadout is a pulse laser or scatter laser on the turret, backed by a twin shuriken catapult mounted underneath. They're operated by a crew of one pilot and one gunner. The cockpit's wraithbone canopy feeds targeting data directly to the crew, meaning the Falcon processes the battlefield faster than anything human operated. And here's the thing, you probably won't get a clean shot at it. The Falcon's hollow fields distort its outline, making it nearly impossible to track at speed. You're not shooting at a tank. You're shooting at a smear of light that's already somewhere else. That's not a tank. That's a ghost story. But here's where it gets genuinely fascinating. Despite being one of the most elegant war machines ever designed, the Falcon has influenced Imperial tank doctrine more than most Imperial designs have. Generals who've never faced one still plan around the possibility that one might show up. The hull is made of wraithbone, lighter than anything the Imperium would consider acceptable, because the Eldar don't believe in taking hits. They believe in not being where the shot lands, which is, annoyingly effective. The Imperium has never successfully reverse-engineered wraithbone technology. They just know the Falcon exists, it's faster than anything they have, and it completely rewrites the rules of armored warfare every time it appears. But if the Falcon is a ghost that haunts Imperial commanders, the next tank is a nightmare that haunts entire planets. Hammerhead gunship. Now the Falcon hovers. The Hammerhead also hovers. Both are Xenos. Both are elegant, and that's where the similarities end. Because where the Falcon is a work of art that happens to kill people, the Hammerhead is a calculator that happens to have a gun strapped to it. The Tau built this thing with one job in mind: delete whatever it's looking at. The primary weapon is a a railgun that can vaporize a battle tank in a single shot, punching through armor that would shrug off most conventional weapons. It engages targets at extreme ranges that make most Imperial tanks look like they're fighting with pocket knives. That's not a tank, that's a sniper rifle with a hover engine. The crew is 3, a pilot, a gunner, and a vehicle commander. 3 Tau whose combined purpose is to make sure the shot lands exactly where it needs to, and it usually does. The Hammerhead's advanced targeting systems, assisted by networked marker light data from Pathfinder teams, achieve a level of accuracy that borders on offensive. You know how Imperial tank crews achieve comparable accuracy? Prayer, literal religious ritual. They anoint the cannon with sacred oils, chant binary hymns to the machine spirit, and hope the Emperor guides the shell. The Tau just run the numbers, which is, not ideal for the Imperium. This is the purest expression of the Tau's greater good philosophy welded into a chassis. No individual heroism, no glory charges, no screaming battle cries, just communal precision. A crew working in perfect sync, supported by an entire cadre's worth of marker light data to put one round exactly where it needs to go. The Hammerhead doesn't need heavy armor because by the time you've spotted it, the math is already done. But if cold, calculating precision sounds clinical, wait until you meet a tank that runs on actual disease. Battle Wagon. After 2 vehicles built with surgical precision and centuries of engineering philosophy, we now arrive at the Orc Battle Wagon, a vehicle that was designed by nobody, engineered by accident, and held together by sheer optimism. Here's the thing about Orc engineering, it shouldn't work. Like on a fundamental physics level, none of it should work. The Battle Wagon is the crown jewel of this insanity. No 2 battle wagons are identical because no 2 battle wagons were built with the same pile of garbage. Armor thickness on a single vehicle can vary wildly, depending on which side happened to have more scrap available that day. One flank might be reinforced with layers of stolen tank plating. The other flank might be a car door and some wishful thinking. Weaponry? Whatever was bolted on last. That's literally the design philosophy. The power source situation is even worse. Some battle wagons run on crude combustion engines cobbled together from looted parts. Others have salvaged alien technology just sort of jammed in there next to the main engine, both running simultaneously for zero reason. Hey Grug, what powers this thing? Yes, they can haul a mob of orc boys into battle or serve as a rolling fortress for a war boss who wants to feel important. The average combat lifespan of a battle wagon is measured in battles, not years. And it's not many battles. That's not a vehicle, that's a countdown. But here's where it gets genuinely weird. Battle wagons that survive multiple fights do seem to perform beyond what their construction should allow. Not because anyone repairs them properly, but because orcs collectively believe they're tougher now. Orc psychic energy, the wage field, can influence how well their technology functions because enough orcs looked at a smoking wreck and went, nah, that's fine. The vehicle is partially powered by vibes. Militarized, weaponized vibes. And somehow it works, which is more than you can say for the next vehicle's crew, who are slowly being dissolved by their own tank. Leman Russ Battle Tank. This is the one. The tank that defines the Imperium of Man more than any cathedral, any boulder, any golden throne. The Leman Russ Battle Tank has been the standard main battle tank of the Imperial Guard since approximately M31, and it has not stopped rolling off production lines since. Front armor rated at 14, side armor at 13, rear at 10. The primary armament is a battle cannon with an effective range of 72 inches on the tabletop, backed by a hull-mounted Lascannon for anything the main gun doesn't vaporize on the first shot. In terms of raw firepower, the only things that outclass it are super heavies. Everything else is looking up at it. Countless variants have been produced, not minor tweaks, full redesigns. Individual regiments customize their Leman Russ tanks so heavily that no 2 look exactly alike across the entire Imperium. Annihilators, Eradicators, Vanquishers, Executioners. Each one tweaked, repainted, blessed, and sent back out to die. And die they do. The average crew doesn't last long inside a Leman Russ in active service. The Imperium treats guardsmen as expendable by design, cycling fresh bodies into these steel coffins faster than most regiments can train replacements. That's the best case scenario inside the Imperium's most reliable war machine, which is, not ideal. But here's the part that genuinely gets me. The tank is named after Leman Russ, Primarch of the Space Wolves, one of the Emperor's own sons. And almost nobody in the Imperium knows that. The crews who live and die inside these things revere the name through rote tradition, repeating prayers to a figure they couldn't identify if you showed them a picture. They worship a word. The meaning was stripped out of it 10,000 years ago and nobody bothered to put it back. That's not just a tank. That's the Imperium's entire soul, welded drilled it into steel. But if the Leman Russ is the Imperium's workhorse, the battle wagon is what happens when engineering has zero rules and the mechanic is fueled entirely by enthusiasm and violence. Plague Burst Crawler. Okay, so after the quiet tragedy of the Leman Russ, let's talk about something that will make you physically uncomfortable. The Plague Burst Crawler isn't really a tank. It's a tumor on treads, a rotting, breathing, leaking biological weapon that belongs to the Death Guard, Nurgle's favorite sons, and it poisons everything around it just by existing. The core of this thing is a Plague Burst mortar, a giant launcher that lobs shells filled with demonic filth and toxic sludge across the battlefield. The crew inside? They're Death Guard Marines, already blessed by Nurgle's rot, so they're not exactly suffering from it. They welcomed it, their bodies are corroded, bloated, and fused with disease. They're not driving the tank so much as they're symbiotic with it. Where the Marine ends and the machine begins is genuinely unclear, but here's where it gets truly disgusting. The hull itself is alive in the worst possible way. It sweats corrosive slime. It grows pustules and buboes across its surface like a sick animal. The armor plating is encrusted with layers of supernatural decay that actually harden over time, meaning the more rotten it gets, the tougher it becomes. Shooting it just makes it angry and wet. The thing crawls forward at a grinding, deliberate pace, not because of mechanical limitations, but because it doesn't need to rush. It has 2 plague spitters mounted on the front that mount anything in close range with streams of infectious bile, and the mortar can arc shots across the entire battlefield. Speed is irrelevant when you're a rolling plague bomb, and wherever it crawls, the ground beneath it becomes tainted. Soil turns black. Plants wither. The land just gives up. The armor is genuinely tough, reinforced by Nurgle's blessings layered over corroded ceramite. But it's not really there to protect the crew. It's there to keep everything festering inside contained until it reaches the enemy. The crew is an afterthought. The planet is the target. This is a vehicle that embodies disease as a military doctrine, which is, not ideal. But if you think Nurgle's contributions to armored warfare are bad, wait until you see what the orcs consider engineering Thought Land Raider. Remember the Rhino? That billion-unit workhorse that rolls off Forge worlds like it's nothing? One Land Raider costs 40 of them. 40. You could field an entire armored convoy of rhinos for the price of a single one of these things, and the Imperium looked at that math and said worth it. And honestly, they might be right. The Land Raider is wrapped in ceramite bonded adamantium armor plating, giving it armor values of 14 on the front, 14 on the sides, and 14 on the rear. For context, that all-around 14 makes it one of the toughest things on the battlefield, period. Nothing short of dedicated anti-tank weaponry is punching through that with any consistency. On top of that, it carries twin-linked Lascanin sponsons on each side and a twin-linked heavy bolter in the hull, meaning it can vaporize enemy armor and shred infantry in the same breath. And it still has room inside for up to 12 fully armed elite troops. Terminators, veterans, the absolute cream of a chapter's fighting force, delivered directly into the enemy's teeth. This thing has been in active production since the Great Crusade era, well before the Horus Heresy even kicked off. 10,000 years of continuous service, and nobody's come up with anything better for the job. But here's the detail that elevates the Land Raider from really good tank to something almost holy. Most chapters only maintain a handful across the entire chapter. The waiting list to Crew 1 is so long that Marines sometimes serve for decades before they get a single deployment opportunity. Decades. Some veteran crews have fired the main cannons fewer than 100 times across their entire service record. Every single shot is an event. Every deployment is a ceremony. This isn't a vehicle. It's a cathedral on treads. Space Marines don't just want to pilot a Land Raider. They pray they'll get the chance before they die. And if you think that level of reverence is excessive for a tank, wait until you see what happens when the Imperium names one after a Primarch. Rogel Dorn Battle Tank. Most tanks in the Imperium exist because somebody needed to kill something. The Rogel Dorn exists because the Imperium finally got around to designing a proper main battle tank to fill the gap between the Leman Russ and the Baneblade, which is, only about 10,000 years overdue. Here's the thing, the Rogel Dorn is named after the Primarch of the Imperial Fists, the guy who literally fortified the Imperial Palace during the Siege of Terra. His legacy is walls, stubbornness, and refusing to die. So naming a heavy battle tank after him isn't just branding. It's a mission statement. Somewhere in the Mechanicus, someone looked at the Leman Russ and said, we can do better. The result is a tank that's less a tactical evolution and more a rolling fortress that would make its namesake proud. And honestly, they delivered. The Rogel Dorn sits comfortably between the Leman Russ and the Baneblade in terms of both size and firepower, which is a gap the Imperium desperately needed filled. The hull alone makes most medium armor look like it's wearing a paper bag. The main armament is a twin battle cannon, meaning both barrels can lay down devastating volleys that make standard Leman Russ fire look polite by comparison. It takes a full crew complement to operate the thing, plus enough training to make sure those people don't accidentally vaporize each other during a reload cycle. battle. Now the honest truth. The Rogel Dorn was introduced during the lead up to 10th edition, which means its lore is thinner than a guardsman's life expectancy. Tanks like the Leman Russ and Baneblade have decades of stories, campaign books, and codex entries building their legends. The Rogel Dorn has a cool name and impressive stats, but that's actually what makes it exciting. This is the Imperium trying to innovate, which in a civilization that considers technological progress borderline heretical, is practically a revolution. A heavy battle tank designed to actually fill a doctrinal gap, already carving out its own legend alongside machines that have been in service for 10 millennia. But if you think the Imperium's finest are impressive, wait until you see what the Necrons brought to the table. Because their tanks aren't just old, they're older than most species. Repulsor. This is the tank that made half the fanbase nervous and the other half furious. The Repulsor isn't just a new vehicle, it's a statement. A floating, heavily armed statement that the Imperium is changing whether you like it or not. Built exclusively for Primaris Space Marines, the Repulsor runs on anti-gravitational plate technology, meaning it doesn't touch the ground. It just glides over it like a 60-ton insult to every treaded vehicle that came before it. It carries a twin-heavy bolter turret, a heavy onslaught Gatling cannon or Las Talon as its main weapon, plus a spread of secondary guns that turn it into a rolling fortress of suppressive fire. It can transport 10 Primaris Marines into the thick of combat while laying down enough DACA to make an orc jealous. So basically it does everything a Land Raider does, except it also hovers. Cool, that's not threatening at all, but here's where the politics get interesting. The Repulsor's technology comes from the mind of Argomagus Dominus Belisarius Cal, the same 10,000-year-old tech priest who created the Primaris Marines themselves. Cal developed the grav plate technology and the entire Primaris vehicle line in secret, working away in his hidden laboratories for millennia, while the rest of the Mechanicus had zero idea what he was doing. And the wider Adeptus Mechanicus? Many of them view Cal's innovations with deep suspicion, bordering on accusations of tech heresy. The faction that controls all technology in the Imperium, that hoards knowledge like a dragon hoards gold, is looking at a tank built with methods they didn't approve and principles they barely understand. Robout Guilliman personally authorized Cal's work. The Primarch came back from 10,000 years of stasis, looked at Imperial armor doctrine, and essentially said, yeah, none of this is good enough anymore. The Mechanicus can either cooperate or get left behind, and they know it. That's what makes the Repulsor dangerous beyond its firepower. It's not just a combat platform. It's proof that their old guard doesn't control the future. The Mechanicus built their entire civilization on being indispensable. And now there's a tank hovering off the ground that exists because one rogue genius decided their traditions weren't worth respecting. But if you think one controversial tank is enough to shake the Imperium, wait until you see what happens when they build one so big it becomes a religion. Monolith. Every other vehicle in this video was built by something that at least resembles a civilization you can understand. Humans with factories, orcs with scrap heaps, Tau with engineering degrees. The Monolith is none of that. The Monolith is 60 million years old. It was ancient before humanity figured out fire, before the Eldar had an empire, before the Imperium was even a concept some caveman might dream about. Every single monolith currently active in the galaxy is an original, not a reproduction, not a replica, an artifact. Because the Necrons have immense difficulty producing new ones, the knowledge needed to forge them belongs to an era most Necrons can barely remember, let alone replicate. So every monolith floating across a battlefield right now is running on engineering that predates the extinction of the dinosaurs, which is, not ideal from a tech support perspective. But the age isn't even the unsettling part. The monolith's geometry doesn't work. Its dimensions shift depending on who's observing it. Imperial surveyors have struggled to get consistent measurements, not because of instrument error, because the object itself refuses to occupy consistent space. Look at it from one angle and get one set of numbers, look from another and get something completely different. It's less a vehicle and more a math problem that shoots at you. And it absolutely does shoot at you. 4 particle whips sit on its corners, backed by a central portal called the Eternity Gate that pours Necron warriors directly onto the battlefield. Its Gauss flux arcs strip matter apart at the atomic level. But the real party trick is the phase shift. The monolith can materialize directly onto a position, annihilating whatever was there before it arrived. No warning, no buildup. Just suddenly a giant floating pyramid where your fortifications used to be. There's no crew inside. 0 biological operators. The entire thing runs on Necron machine logic, ancient and alien beyond comprehension. It's been thinking for 60 million years. Nobody knows what conclusions it's reached. Frankly, nobody wants to. The monolith doesn't belong on our list of tanks. It barely belongs in this reality. But if you think an ancient dimension-breaking pyramid is the scariest thing in this video, wait until you see what the Imperium built when they decided subtlety was for cowards. Baneblade. Every tank we've covered today has been impressive in its own right. The Baneblade makes them all look like toys. This is the super heavy battle tank. 14 meters of armored hull with layers of ceramite and plasteel thick enough to shrug off virtually anything short of a Titan's weaponry. But here's the thing that really puts it in perspective. The smallest gun mounted on a Baneblade is more destructive than the main armament on most standard battle tanks in the Imperium's arsenal. That's not a tank. That's a mobile fortress that happens to have treads. The main armament is a Baneblade cannon, a massive siege-grade weapon that fires rocket-propelled shells capable of leveling entire fortifications in a single volley. That alone would be overkill. But backing that up is a demolisher cannon, a coaxial autocannon, and multiple sponson-mounted heavy bolters and las cannons covering every possible angle. You don't fight a Baneblade, you just sort of experience one. Operating this monster requires a crew of around 10, including a commander, gunners, loaders, a driver, and engineers. Many crew members serve their entire lives aboard the same vehicle, and the knowledge to maintain one is so rare that some crews pass their positions down through family lines, which is, not ideal for career progression. But here's where things get genuinely heavy. The Imperium has largely lost the ability to manufacture Baneblades from scratch. The STCs required to build them are fragmentary at best, and most in active service are thousands of years old, maintained through obsessive ritual and the prayers of tech priests who may or may not actually understand the engineering. Every Baneblade loss is functionally irreplaceable. Entire campaigns have been launched just to recover damaged ones from battlefields. One tank worth more than the army sent to save it. We started this video with the Rhino, a box so common the Imperium stamps them out by the millions. We end with a machine so rare that losing one reshapes entire war efforts. Millions of disposable transports on one end, and a single cathedral of steel the Imperium would sacrifice regiments to protect on the other. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more, click the video on the screen now.